Maple Crest Estates was the kind of neighborhood that looked like it had been pulled straight out of a glossy real estate brochure. Rows of perfectly trimmed hedges lined the streets, flower beds burst with color every spring, and kids rode their bikes down wide, tree-lined avenues without a care in the world. It was the picture-perfect suburban dream, quiet, orderly, and peaceful. That is, until Alex moved in. Alex wasn't your typical Maple Crest resident. They were tech-savvy, always tinkering with gadgets, and had just bought one of those ultra-modern, smart homes everyone kept hearing about but few actually understood. The house could do everything from adjusting the thermostat to ordering groceries online. There were voice-activated lights, cameras that streamed live footage to Alex's phone, and even a system designed to detect intruders and alert authorities if anything suspicious happened. To Alex, it felt like living in the future. But to some of the neighbors, especially one very particular person, it all seemed, well, a little too flashy. Enter Karen Thompson. If you've ever heard someone refer to an overbearing neighbor as a Karen, then you already know what she was. Like, she wasn't just any Karen, she was the Karen of Maple Crest Estates. As the head of the Homeowners Association, HOA, Karen prided herself on enforcing every rule, no matter how small or ridiculous. Whether it was making sure mailbox colors matched exactly or sending strongly worded letters about lawn ornaments, Karen ran the neighborhood with an iron fist wrapped in passive-aggressive smiles. At first, things between Alex and Karen seemed fine. Sure, Alex noticed her giving them side-eye glances during HOA meetings when they mentioned installing solar panels instead of sticking to traditional energy sources, but nothing major came up. Then again, Alex hadn't been around long enough for Karen to really sink her teeth into whatever issue she decided to focus on next. It didn't take long for that to change. One day, Alex accidentally left their holiday decorations up past January, not because they forgot, they were just busy working on a project. But Karen saw it as a personal affront to the sanctity of Maple Crest's aesthetic standards. A letter arrived in the mail shortly after, neatly typed, and signed by none other than Karen herself. It politely reminded Alex that seasonal decorations needed to be removed within 2 weeks of the holiday ending. Alex rolled their eyes, thinking, who has time to worry about this stuff? Still, they took the decorations down the following weekend. Problem solved, or so they thought, but Karen wasn't done yet. Next, she complained about Alex parking on the street instead of using their driveway. Then came comments about how their recycling bins weren't sorted properly. Each note grew more pointed, each email more aggressive. At first, Alex tried to brush it off, chalking it up to Karen being overly invested in keeping the neighborhood pristine. But as the critiques piled up, it became clear that this wasn't just about rules anymore. It was personal. What Karen didn't realize was that Alex wasn't the type to back down easily. Back in high school, Alex had been the kid who argued with teachers over unfair grades and stood up for classmates getting picked on. They weren't afraid of confrontation, and they certainly weren't going to let someone dictate how they lived in their own home. So when Karen brought up yet another complaint at the monthly HOA meeting, a $50 fine for an overgrown hedge that Alex swore wasn't theirs, things finally boiled over. I don't think I should have to pay for something I didn't do, Alex said calmly, though their clenched fists under the table told a different story. Karen shot back immediately, her tone dripping with condescension. Well, maybe if you paid attention to your property instead of playing with your fancy gadgets, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The room fell silent. Everyone knew Karen was notorious for picking fights, but this felt different. This wasn't just about hedges or parking spots. It was about control. And Alex wasn't about to let her win. As the meeting ended and people filed out, whispers filled the air. Some neighbors sympathized with Alex, tired of Karen's constant nitpicking. Others sided with her, believing Alex was being difficult. Either way, tension simmered beneath the surface, ready to boil over at any moment. Little did anyone know the feud between Alex and Karen was about to take a turn no one could have predicted. What started as a minor disagreement over yard work would soon spiral into something far bigger and far stranger than anyone in Maple Crest could imagine. The tension between Alex and Karen didn't just fizzle out after that heated HOA meeting. If anything, it grew worse. Karen wasn't the kind of person to let things go, not when she believed she was in the right. To her, Alex's refusal to pay the $50 fine for the overgrown hedge wasn't just a minor disagreement, it was a direct challenge to her authority. And Karen did not take challenges lightly. For days, she stewed over what had happened at the meeting. She replayed the conversation in her head, imagining all the clever comebacks she could have used to put Alex in their place. But as much as she wanted to win this battle of wills, Karen also knew she needed proof. Something concrete to show everyone else in the neighborhood that Alex was breaking the rules. That's when she decided to take matters into her own hands. 1. Evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the streets of Maple Crest grew quiet, Karen marched over to Alex's house. She carried a clipboard with her, filled with notes about violations and reminders of HOA policies. Her plan was simple: confront Alex face to face, demand payment for the fine, and maybe even inspect their property for other infractions while she was there. When she arrived, Karen knocked firmly on the front door. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. Frustrated, she peered through the window, trying to see if anyone was home. The lights were off inside, but something caught her eye. The door was slightly ajar. It wasn't wide open, just cracked enough to suggest someone might have forgotten to lock it. Karen hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do next. On one hand, barging into someone's house uninvited felt wrong, even to her. But on the other hand, this was her chance to prove once and for all that Alex wasn't taking the HOA seriously. If she could find evidence of negligence or rule breaking, she'd have the upper hand. Besides, Alex probably wouldn't even notice she'd been inside. With that thought, Karen pushed the door open further and stepped inside. What she didn't know, and what Alex hadn't mentioned to anyone, was that their smart home system was programmed to detect unusual activity. Cameras mounted around the house started recording as soon as Karen crossed the threshold. Motion sensors triggered alarms, and the automated voice system announced, "Intruder detected. Initiating." Security protocol. At first, Karen froze, startled by the sudden noise. Then, realizing nothing seemed to be happening, she laughed nervously to herself. Probably just some dumb alarm, she muttered under her breath, shaking her head. She continued walking toward the living room, still clutching her clipboard, like a weapon. But then, everything changed. Seconds later, the sound of police sirens pierced the air. Blue and red lights flashed outside as multiple squad cars screeched to a halt in front of Alex's house. Neighbors peered out their windows, curious about what was going on. Some grabbed their phones to record the scene, while others whispered theories to each other. Inside the house, Karen stood frozen in shock. Before she could react, heavily armed officers burst through the door shouting commands. "Hands where we can see them! Don't move!" Karen dropped her clipboard and raised her hands instinctively, her mind racing. What was happening? Why? Were the police here? Had Alex called them? Was this some sort of trap? Meanwhile, Alex was completely unaware of the chaos unfolding back at their house. Earlier that evening, they had left to run errands. A quick trip to the grocery store and a stop at the post office. When they returned home, they were greeted by flashing lights and uniformed officers swarming their yard. Alex parked their car and got out cautiously, heart pounding. "What's going on?" they asked, approaching one of the officers. "Are you the homeowner?" The officer replied, his tone serious. "Yes, I am," Alex said, nodding. "What's all this about?" The officer explained that their smart home system had sent an automatic alert to local law enforcement, triggering a high-priority response. Apparently, the system interpreted Karen's entry as a potential break-in and activated its highest level, security protocol, what Alex jokingly referred to as SWAT mode. Alex immediately realized what must have happened. They pulled out their phone and accessed the live feed from their security cameras, showing the officers footage of Karen entering the house. After confirming Alex's identity and reviewing the video, the officers lowered their weapons, but not before handcuffing Karen for trespassing. As the situation unfolded, neighbors gathered outside, whispering among themselves. Some looked horrified, while others struggled to suppress smirks. One woman muttered, I told you Karen takes things too far. Another neighbor joked quietly. Guess that smart home really is smarter than we thought. By the time the dust settled, Karen was sitting in the back of a police car, humiliated and furious. Officers assured Alex they would handle the matter appropriately, though they couldn't help teasing a little about the irony of the situation. Looks like your house has better instincts than most people, one of them quipped as they packed up their gear. Later that night, as Alex sat on their couch staring at the now closed front door, they couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Relief, yes, they were glad no one had gotten hurt, but also guilt. This wasn't how they'd imagined standing up to Karen would turn out. Sure, she deserved consequences for barging into their house, but calling in the SWAT team, even if it was accidental, it felt like overkill. And yet, as ridiculous as the whole thing was, Alex couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing Karen finally get taken down a peg, or 5. For years, she'd lorded over the neighborhood, making everyone jump at her every command. Now, thanks to a combination of her own recklessness and modern technology, she'd been humbled in the most public way possible. Word of the incident spread quickly. By morning, it was the talk of Maple Crest. Local news outlets picked up the story, dubbing it Smart Homegate. Social media exploded with memes and jokes about Karen's misadventure, turning her into an overnight internet sensation, for all the wrong reasons. Despite the absurdity of it all, Alex knew this wasn't the end. Karen wouldn't let something like this slide without a fight, and as satisfying as it was to see her brought down, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that things were only going to get more complicated from here. The morning after the incident, Maple Crest Estates woke up to a scene straight out of a movie. Blue and red police lights still flickered faintly in the early dawn as officers wrapped up their investigation outside Alex's house. Neighbors, who had gone to bed wondering what all the commotion was about, now found themselves staring at the aftermath of a situation no one could have predicted. Word spread like wildfire. Karen Thompson, yes, that Karen, had been arrested for trespassing after breaking into Alex's home. And if that wasn't wild enough, it turned out her dramatic exit involved being led away in handcuffs by a SWAT team. For Alex, the night had been a blur. After explaining the situation to the officers and showing them footage from the security cameras, they'd spent hours answering questions and signing statements. By the time everything was sorted, exhaustion had set in, but sleep didn't come easily. Every time Alex closed their eyes, they replayed the events in their mind. The flashing lights, the shouting, Karen standing frozen with her hands raised. It was surreal, almost comical, but also deeply unsettling. When Alex finally stepped outside the next morning, they were greeted by a sea of curious faces. Neighbors lingered on sidewalks and driveways, pretending to water plants or check their mail while sneaking glances toward Alex's house. A few brave souls approached directly, offering awkward condolences mixed with thinly veiled curiosity. "Are you okay?" one older man asked, his tone cautious. "We heard there was some kind of, situation last night." Alex nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine, just a lot happened." "Thanks for asking." The man hesitated before adding, "You know, Karen can be intense sometimes, but this is something else entirely." He shook his head, clearly unsure whether to laugh or cringe. As the day went on, the story grew legs. Local news vans arrived, setting up camp near Alex's driveway. Reporters knocked on doors, hoping to snag interviews with neighbors, or better yet, Alex themselves. Social media buzzed with memes and jokes about Smart Homegate, turning the incident into both entertainment and a cautionary tale. One viral post featured a cartoon of a house wearing sunglasses with the caption, "When your smart home calls SWAT on your nosy neighbor." Karen, meanwhile, was not taking any of this lightly. She'd been released from custody late the previous night, pending further investigation, but her reputation was already in tatters. Online trolls had a field day, dubbing her HOA Karen and flooding comment sections with snarky remarks. For someone who prided herself on order and control, this public humiliation was unbearable. Determined to fight back, Karen hired a lawyer within hours of her release. Together, they drafted a statement claiming that Alex had deliberately lured her into a trap. According to Karen, she'd only entered the house because the door was open, and she wanted to leave a formal notice about the unpaid fine. The smart home system, she argued, had misinterpreted her actions, leading to an unnecessary and traumatizing police response. Her lawyer went a step further, filing a countersuit against Alex for harassment and emotional distress. The lawsuit alleged that Alex's reckless use of technology had caused Karen undue harm and damaged her standing in the community. While many residents rolled their eyes at the claim, others began to question whether Alex might have gone too far. Tensions in Maple Crest reached a boiling point. Some neighbors rallied behind Alex, praising them for standing up to Karen's bullying tactics. Others sided with Karen, accusing Alex of using excessive measures and creating unnecessary drama. Conversations at the coffee shop and grocery store turned heated, with people taking sides and speculating about what would happen next. Amidst the chaos, Alex struggled to keep their head above water. Between dealing with reporters camped outside their house and fending off angry messages online, life felt overwhelming. Strangers showed up uninvited, hoping to catch a glimpse of the infamous smart home. Someone even vandalized Alex's car overnight, scrawling HOA wins across the windshield in red paint. It wasn't just the external pressure that weighed heavily on Alex. It was the guilt. Deep down, they knew Karen deserved consequences for barging into their house. But calling in a SWAT team? Even accidentally, it felt extreme. What started as a minor disagreement over yard work had spiraled into something far bigger than anyone anticipated. One evening, as Alex sat alone in their living room scrolling through social media, they came across a video clip of Karen giving an interview outside her own home. Dressed in a tailored blazer and clutching a tissue, she tearfully insisted she was the victim in all this. "I was only trying to do my job," she said, her voice trembling. "Now my life has been ruined because of someone else's negligence." Watching her speak, Alex felt a pang of sympathy, not for Karen exactly, but for how quickly things had escalated. They hadn't intended for any of this to happen. All they'd wanted was to live peacefully in their smart home without constantly being scrutinized. Instead, they'd become the center of a neighborhood feud, a media circus, and potentially a legal battle. That's when Alex realized they couldn't let things continue unchecked. Running away wasn't an option. They'd invested too much in this house and this community to give up now. But staying meant finding a way to mend fences, literally and figuratively. The next morning, Alex made a decision. They called a trusted neighbor, Margaret Ellis, an elderly woman who had lived in Maple Crest for decades. Margaret was known for her calm demeanor and ability to mediate conflicts. More importantly, she'd always struck Alex as fair-minded, someone who valued harmony over drama. "Margaret," Alex began when she answered the phone, "I need your help. Things are getting out of hand and I don't know how to fix them." Margaret listened patiently as Alex explained everything, from the initial dispute with Karen to the SWAT team debacle and its fallout. When Alex finished, there was a long pause before Margaret spoke. "You're right," she said finally. "This has gone too far. But Alex, you're not the only one who's tired of Karen's behavior. People are scared to speak up, but they're fed up. Maybe it's time we did something about it, together." Her words gave Alex hope for the first time in days. Perhaps they weren't alone in this fight after all. With Margaret's guidance, Alex began reaching out to other neighbors, quietly gauging their feelings about Karen's leadership style and the HOA's rigid rules. To their surprise, they discovered a surprising amount of support. Many residents admitted privately that they'd grown weary of Karen's micromanaging ways, but feared retaliation if they spoke out publicly. Encouraged by these conversations, Alex and Margaret hatched a plan. They decided to organize a town hall meeting, a chance for everyone in Maple Crest to voice their concerns openly and work toward solutions. The goal wasn't to attack Karen personally, but to address the underlying issues dividing the community. As they prepared for the meeting, Alex couldn't help but feel nervous. Would people show up? Would they listen? Or would Karen and her allies dominate the conversation, turning the event into another battleground? Despite their doubts, Alex knew one thing for certain. Silence wasn't an option anymore. If they wanted to reclaim their peace and maybe even save their neighborhood, they had to take a stand. The town hall meeting was set for a Wednesday evening, held in the community center that rarely saw much use beyond holiday parties and HOA gatherings. As Alex and Margaret prepared for the event, they knew it would be a turning point, not just for them, but for the entire neighborhood. The stakes were high and nerves were running even higher. Would this meeting bring healing or further division? No one could say for sure. Word about the gathering spread quickly. Flyers appeared on mailboxes and lampposts, inviting all residents to attend. Some neighbors whispered excitedly about finally having a chance to air their grievances, while others grumbled that it was a waste of time. Karen, predictably, wasn't thrilled about the idea. When she heard about the meeting, she immediately called her lawyer, demanding they draft a statement condemning it as a coordinated attack against her character. Her lawyer advised caution, warning her not to escalate things further until the legal case played out. But Karen, stubborn as ever, refused to stay silent. On the day of the meeting, the atmosphere in Maple Crest was tense. Neighbors exchanged polite hellos during the day, but there was an undercurrent of unease. By evening, cars filled the parking lot outside the community center, and people began filing in, clutching cups of coffee or bottles of water. The room buzzed with quiet chatter, punctuated by nervous laughter. Chairs had been arranged in rows facing a small stage where a podium stood waiting. Alex arrived early, accompanied by Margaret, who carried a clipboard filled with notes. Together, they greeted attendees at the door, offering warm smiles despite their own anxiety. Karen showed up too, flanked by her lawyer and two loyal supporters from the HOA board. She wore a crisp blazer and clutched a stack of papers, likely her rebuttal to whatever accusations might come her way. Her presence loomed large over the room, though many avoided making eye contact with her. Instead, they focused on finding seats, shuffling awkwardly as if unsure whether to sit close to her or far away. As the clock struck 7, Margaret stepped up to the podium to open the meeting. Her voice was calm but firm as she welcomed everyone and explained the purpose of the evening. "We're here tonight because our neighborhood has been through a lot lately," she said, looking around the room. "What started as a disagreement between two neighbors has turned into something bigger, a reflection of deeper issues we need to address. Tonight is about listening, understanding, and working together to move forward." Her words earned scattered applause, though some people simply nodded in agreement. Then, one by one, residents were invited to share their thoughts. At first, only a few brave souls spoke up, voicing concerns about Karen's leadership style and the HOA's strict enforcement of minor rules. One man talked about how he'd been fined for painting his mailbox a shade of blue that didn't match the HOA guidelines exactly. A young mother recounted how Karen had scolded her for letting her kids draw chalk pictures on the driveway, even though they washed off easily. Each story added fuel to the growing sentiment that Karen's approach was more harmful than helpful. For every complaint, however, there were murmurs of dissent. Some attendees argued that rules existed for a reason, and that without structure, the neighborhood would lose its charm. Others defended Karen, saying she was simply doing her job and shouldn't be vilified for enforcing policies everyone had agreed to when they moved in. When it was Alex's turn to speak, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to them as they approached the podium, gripping the sides tightly to steady their nerves. They took a deep breath before beginning. "I never intended for any of this to happen," Alex said, their voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I moved here hoping for a peaceful place to live, somewhere I could feel at home. Instead, I found myself caught in a situation I didn't ask for. Yes, my smart home system triggered a response no one expected, not even me, and yes, Karen ended up in handcuffs because of it, but none of that changes the fact that this whole thing got out of hand because of misunderstandings and miscommunication." They paused, glancing around the room. "I'm not perfect, and neither is anyone else here. We're all human, and Sometimes we make mistakes. What matters now is what we do next. Do we keep fighting each other or do we try to find common ground? Their speech was met with prolonged applause, though Karen sat stiffly in her seat, arms crossed and lips pressed into a thin line. When it was her turn to speak, she rose slowly, adjusting her blazer before stepping up to the podium. Her tone was clipped and defensive as she read from her prepared statement. "I've dedicated years of my life to serving this community," she began, her voice carrying a note of indignation. "Every decision I've made has been with the best interests of Maple Crest in mind. If certain individuals choose to disregard the rules we've collectively agreed upon, then chaos will follow. This isn't about me, it's about maintaining order." Her words landed like a stone dropped into still water. While some nodded in agreement, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. When she finished speaking, a woman in the back raised her hand timidly. "With respect," the woman said, addressing Karen directly. "Sometimes order feels less like fairness and more like control. Maybe it's time we rethink how we handle disagreements instead of punishing every little mistake." Her comment sparked a wave of murmurs throughout the room. People began nodding, exchanging glances, as if realizing they weren't alone in their frustrations. Even those who initially sided with Karen seemed to soften, perhaps recognizing that her methods had gone too far. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that change was inevitable. Margaret proposed forming a new committee to review HOA policies and ensure they balanced structure with flexibility. She also suggested holding regular check-ins so residents could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. To everyone's surprise, the motion passed unanimously. Even Karen reluctantly agreed, though her expression remained sour. Outside the community center, as neighbors lingered to chat, Alex felt a weight lift off their shoulders. It wasn't a perfect solution and there was still work to be done, but it was a start. For the first time in weeks, they allowed themselves to hope that peace might be possible after all. In the days following the town hall meeting, Maple Crest Estates felt different. It wasn't a dramatic shift. There were no parades or fireworks, but there was an undeniable sense of movement, like gears grinding back into place after being stuck for too long. The neighborhood had taken its first shaky steps toward healing, and while it would take time to see real change, people seemed willing to try. For Alex, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Reporters stopped camping outside. Their house and online trolls gradually lost interest in the drama. Even the vandalism on their car, a red-painted message that had stung more than they cared to admit, had been scrubbed clean by a neighbor who showed up one morning with a sponge and some elbow grease. "Thought you could use a hand," the man had said with a shrug before walking away. Small gestures like that reminded Alex why they loved living here in the first place. But not everything was smooth sailing. Karen, though quieter now, hadn't disappeared entirely. She attended HOA meetings but sat silently in the corner, her usual domineering presence replaced by something closer to resignation. Her lawyer continued pushing forward with the countersuit, arguing that Alex's smart home system had caused her undue stress and public embarrassment. Meanwhile, Alex's own legal team worked tirelessly to defend them, pointing out that Karen's trespassing was what triggered the entire chain of events. Despite the lingering tension, Alex found themselves leaning heavily on Margaret Ellis. The retired schoolteacher had become more than just an ally. She was a mentor, offering advice and encouragement when things felt overwhelming. One afternoon, as they sat together on Alex's porch sipping lemonade, Margaret shared her thoughts about the future. "You've got a good heart, Alex," she said, setting her glass down on the wooden railing. "And I think most folks around here know that. But don't let this experience harden you. People are complicated, we all make mistakes. What matters is how we grow from them." Alex nodded, absorbing her words. They knew Margaret was right, but it wasn't always easy to stay positive. Some days they wondered if moving to Maple Crest had been a mistake. Other days they felt grateful for the lessons they'd learned, even the hard ones. Margaret must have sensed their uncertainty because she added, "Change doesn't happen overnight. It takes patience, and sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But look at what you've already accomplished. You stood up to someone who thought they were untouchable. That takes courage." Her praise warmed Alex, but it also made them reflect on the bigger picture. This wasn't just about them versus Karen anymore. It was about creating a community where everyone felt heard and respected. And as daunting as that goal seemed, Alex realized they weren't alone in pursuing it. The new committee Margaret had proposed during the town hall meeting quickly gained traction. Volunteers signed up to help review HOA policies, including several residents who had previously stayed silent out of fear of crossing Karen. To everyone's surprise, even a few former supporters of Karen joined the effort. Not because they agreed with Alex, but because they recognized the need for balance. One such volunteer was Tom, a middle-aged man who had once praised Karen's strict enforcement of rules. At the first committee meeting, he admitted sheepishly, "I used to think Karen was doing the right thing, but after seeing how divided this place has become, I realize maybe we've been focusing on the wrong stuff. Rules are important, sure, but so is kindness. Maybe it's time we focused on both." His honesty earned nods of agreement from the group, and Alex couldn't help but feel hopeful. Slowly but surely, the tide was turning. Still, Karen remained a wild card. Though she rarely spoke during meetings, her sharp glares and occasional muttered comments hinted at simmering resentment. Alex tried reaching out to her once, hoping to clear the air, but Karen brushed them off with a curt, "I have nothing to say to you." It hurt, but Alex understood. Pride was a powerful thing, and Karen wasn't ready to let go of hers yet. Instead of pushing further, Alex decided to focus on what they could control, rebuilding trust with their neighbors and ensuring the new policies reflected fairness rather than fear. As weeks turned into months, small victories began stacking up. The committee revised outdated HOA guidelines, loosening restrictions on things like holiday decorations and mailbox colors. They introduced a system for anonymous feedback, allowing residents to voice concerns without worrying about backlash. Most importantly, they emphasized communication over punishment, encouraging dialogue instead of fines. The changes didn't go unnoticed. Neighbors started chatting more openly, sharing laughs at block parties and helping each other with yard work. Kids played together again, their laughter echoing through the streets. Even the annual Maple Crest Summer Picnic, which had been canceled the previous year due to low attendance, drew record numbers this time around. Through it all, Alex remained cautious but optimistic. They knew old habits died hard, and there would likely be bumps along the way. But every smile from a neighbor, every handshake, every thank you reinforced their belief that progress was possible. Karen, meanwhile, retreated further into the background. She still lived in Maple Crest, but her influence waned with each passing day. Rumors circulated that she was planning to move to another neighborhood, though no one knew for sure. Whatever her plans, it was clear she'd lost the power she once held so tightly. One evening, as Alex stood in their driveway watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, Margaret walked over with a plate of freshly baked cookies. "Thought you might need a little pick-me-up," she said, handing the plate to Alex. "Thanks," Alex replied with a grin. "You always seem to know when I need cheering up." Margaret chuckled. "Well, it's not rocket science. You've been carrying a lot on your shoulders lately. Just remember, you're not alone in this. We're all in it together." Her words lingered long after she left, filling Alex with a quiet determination. Maple Crest wasn't perfect, and neither were its residents. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like home. Months passed, and Maple Crest Estates began to feel like a different place. The neighborhood wasn't perfect. No community ever is, but it was kinder, more inclusive, and far less tense than it had been during Karen's reign. People smiled at each other on the streets again, shared gardening tips over backyard fences, and even organized weekend cookouts in the park. It was as if the weight of years of stifling rules and passive-aggressive behavior had finally lifted, leaving behind a lighter, brighter version of itself. For Alex, life settled into a rhythm they hadn't thought possible just months before. Their smart home still hummed with efficiency, though SWAT mode had long since been disabled. Instead, Alex used their tech skills to help neighbors set up basic security systems or troubleshoot Wi-Fi issues. They became known not just as the person with the futuristic house, but as someone who genuinely cared about the people around them. The HOA underwent significant changes, too. After weeks of deliberation, the new committee unveiled a revised set of guidelines that prioritized flexibility and fairness. Gone were the nitpicky rules about mailbox colors and holiday decoration deadlines. In their place came policies focused on safety, sustainability, and fostering a sense of belonging. One particularly popular addition was a monthly newsletter, highlighting resident achievements from high school graduations to retirement celebrations. Karen predictably struggled to adapt. Her name disappeared from the HOA board roster, replaced by volunteers eager to embrace the fresh direction. She attended meetings sporadically at first, her presence marked by icy silence and occasional eye rolls. Over time, however, she stopped, showing up altogether. Rumors swirled that she planned to sell her house and move elsewhere, but no one knew for sure. And honestly, most residents didn't dwell on it. They were too busy enjoying the newfound harmony. One crisp autumn morning, Alex received an unexpected knock at their door. When they opened it, they found Margaret standing there, bundled in a cozy scarf and holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Mind if I join you for a bit?" she asked, smiling warmly. "Of course not," Alex replied, stepping aside to let her. And they sat together in the living room, sipping their drinks and chatting about everything from the upcoming Halloween decorations contest to the latest book club pick. Eventually, Margaret leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "You know, I've been thinking a lot lately about how far we've come," she said. "It hasn't always been easy, but look at us now. We're stronger because of what happened, even if it didn't feel like it at the time." Alex nodded, reflecting on the journey. "Yeah, it's funny. At first I thought moving here was a mistake, but now, I wouldn't trade it for anything. This place feels real, you know? Like we're all figuring things out together." Margaret smiled. "Exactly. And you played a big part in making that happen. You stood your ground when it mattered, even when it was hard. That takes guts." Her words brought a lump to Alex's throat. They hadn't realized until that moment how much they needed to hear those words, not just as validation, but as a reminder that growth often comes from discomfort. As the conversation wound down, Margaret glanced toward the window where golden sunlight filtered through the trees. "You know, change isn't something you can force. It happens slowly, one decision at a time. But when enough people commit to doing better, amazing things can happen." Alex felt a surge of gratitude for Margaret's wisdom, for the support of their neighbors, and for the lessons they'd learned along the way. Life in Maple Crest wasn't without its challenges, but it was theirs. Together, they were building something worth fighting for. Later that week, Alex attended the annual Fall Festival, an event that had nearly been canceled the previous year due to low turnout. This time, however, the park buzzed with energy. Kids darted between booths playing games, parents chatted over plates of chili and cornbread, and laughter filled the air. Even the weather cooperated, offering a perfect mix of sunshine and cool breezes. As Alex wandered through the crowd, they noticed familiar faces everywhere. There was Tom, manning a pumpkin carving station and laughing as kids tried to scoop out seeds without making a mess. Nearby, the elderly couple who lived 3 doors down handed out caramel apples while reminiscing about festivals past. And then there was Margaret, perched on a bench knitting scarves for charity, her hands moving deftly despite the chatter around her. At one point, Alex found themselves standing near the stage where local musicians performed acoustic sets. Young girl approached shyly, clutching a handmade card. "This is for you," she said, thrusting it into Alex's hand before darting back to her parents. Curious, Alex opened the card. Inside was a simple drawing of a house surrounded by stick figure, neighbors holding hands. Beneath it, written in careful block letters, were the words, "Thank you for being brave." Tears welled in Alex's eyes as they looked up, searching for the girl in the crowd. When they spotted her, they waved and mouthed a silent, "Thank you." That night, as fireworks lit up the sky above the park, Alex stood among their neighbors, feeling a deep sense of connection. Maple Crest wasn't just a neighborhood anymore, it was a community. And while the road ahead might still hold challenges, Alex knew they'd face them together.